Hi, everybody. Jay Privman, the national correspondent with Daily Racing Form, back again with my Derby Watch partner, Mike Watchmaker, to go over all the implications that went into putting together this week's Derby Watch. And Mike, there were a lot. We have 4 newcomers to this week's list based on the results of races last week. Let's start with the most significant race from last week, that being the Risen Star Stakes. There's 4 horses in here who are on our Derby Watch list, 2 newcomers and 2 who are already there. Your thoughts on this race, starting with the winner, Bravazzo?
Well, Jay, I thought in still regard and Principe Graham were big disappointments in this race. Neither one of them really showed up, especially Principe Graham. And he's off our list this week. But in still regard, had no run at all, finishing 4th. And when you took those 2 out of the equation, it really didn't leave a heck of a lot left in that race. And I don't think a whole bunch of horses ran. And I don't think it was an especially strong prep. And I don't want to take anything away from the first 2 finishers, Bravazzo and Snapper Sinclair. They're both very game horses, but it only got a 93 buyer. It wasn't that impressive visually. And I'm taking the skeptical approach on this race.
And one thing that I thought really impacted this race, Mike, was the pace. There just wasn't a really strong pace to this race. Everybody kind of stayed in place the whole way around there. And Bravazzo did hold off Snapper Sinclair. It was a tough beat for Snapper Sinclair. Noble Indy was 3rd. I thought he ran a decent race, but nothing that was spectacular. And I'm with you. So far, my initial impressions of this race are not warm and fuzzy. I think there's better ones out there. Maybe these horses will step forward in their next starts, like the Louisiana Derby. But right now, we're certainly both, I think, viewing this race with a little bit of skepticism. Let's move on to the other graded stake race that was run over the weekend that impacted our Derby Watch list. That was the Southwest Stakes, run on Monday at Oaklawn Park. And my boy Jack won this race. And this was another race, Mike, where in my mind, there were circumstances that made a difference. At Fairgrounds, it was the pace. In this race, it was the track condition. Your thoughts?
Right, Jay, you're alluding to the fact that the rail was very, very live Monday at Oaklawn. I watched the whole card at Oaklawn in real time, and the rail just seemed to get better as the day went along. And it was very strong towards the end of the card, which is when the Southwest was run. And my boy Jack got through on the inside. He had not only a dream trip, but he was on the best part of the racetrack, and he blew that field away. But, you know, I'm always reluctant to take at face value horses who I believe capitalize on a track bias. So my boy Jack's going to have to show me he can do that again when circumstances aren't so much in his favor.
Now, the 2nd and 3rd place finishers in this race were on our Derby Watch list, remain on our Derby Watch list. That was Combatant, who was 2nd, and Sporting Chance, who made his first start in 5.5 months, finishing 3rd. I thought they both ran decent races, Mike. Combatant seems to be kind of a solid performer, and Sporting Chance certainly needed the race and had a little bit of trouble. But this is another race that I'm just thinking there's better ones out there. What did you think of the 2nd and 3rd place finishers?
Well, if you were a Combatant fan going into the Southwest, I think you should probably stay one, because he ran against the grain of the racetrack, finishing 2nd. Now, on the downside, he's now running 3 stakes races, and he's been walloped in all of them. I mean, he's hit the board, and he's run reasonably well, but he still hasn't come close to winning any of them. But he was against the grain of the racetrack. I think Sporting Chance is a bit more polarizing. I mean, he had every right to need that race, because he was coming off the layoff when he was hopeful start on Labor Day weekend. But that said, and he did have a little bit of traffic trouble in the stretch, got knocked around a little bit. Said Chance was on the inside for much Southwest. And if we're talking about the rail really good, well, he was on the best racetrack, a good chunk of that race. Now, he's there to improve. He better next time out. I'm going to be against him.
You mentioned 3 of the 4 newcomers this week's Derby Watch: Bravazzo, Snapper Sinclair, and my boy Jack. The 4th and final newcomer to this week's list is Justify, who made his first start of the year over the weekend at Santa Anita, got a strong buyer speed figure, and based on that and the fact that his connections are going to try and make the Kentucky Derby, we put him on our Derby Watch top 20 this week. Mike, your thoughts on the debut effort of Justify?
Well, it was a wow performance. I don't think the field he beat was especially good, but my goodness, what can you ask a horse to do in his debut more than what Justified did in his debut? He ran fast, he won big, he won decisively, and he looks like a horse that wants to run much more distance, and he looks like a horse who's got an unlimited future. This is a horse that not only didn't race at 2, he didn't even run in January. So, I mean, he's sort of got the double mush to get over here, not only the Apollo thing, but I mean, this horse is going to be an extremely lightly raced horse by the time he makes the starting gate for the Derby, and I'm expecting him to make the starting gate for the Derby.
As Mike was alluding to, no horse has won the Kentucky Derby without racing as a 2-year-old since Apollo in 1882. My Derby Watch story this week focuses on those horses. There have been 61 since 1937, and of those 61, 3 finished second, 5 were third, and the rest finished out of the money. And in addition to Justify, another horse, Mike, who's trying to pull that off this year is Magnum Moon. Now, he was already on our Derby Watch list based on his maiden win last month at Gulfstream Park. He made his second start last Thursday at Tampa Bay Downs, going 2 turns, and won that race. Next time he'll run in the stake. But what did you think of his race last week at Tampa Bay?
I like this horse, Jay. I really do. I think he's a really nice horse, and I thought he ran big at Tampa. Okay, he didn't beat anybody, and he beat Gress Spire figure-wise from a 95 in his debut to an 87 in this race. But this race was just practice. I mean, instead of getting caught 4 wide around the first turn, Saez took him back and tucked him in. And as a result of that, this horse ate dirt for much of the first turn and all the way down the backstretch while being farther off the pace than he was in his sprint debut. He rated beautifully. Then he angled 4 wide later in the far turn, inhaled those horses without ever being let loose by Saez. And it was his first time around 2 turns. I'm very taken with this horse. I think he's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I like the education that Saez gave this horse. I thought it was a very shrewd way to handle this situation, to let him sit behind horses, to wait until the top of the stretch to wheel him out and have him learn a lot, because there's not a whole lot of time to learn a lot with a horse who didn't make his debut until January. He's only going to have, it looks like, 4 starts before the Kentucky Derby. So the education is invaluable, and I thought it was a very smart way of handling things last week when he won that race. Well, that's our look at all the races that impacted our Derby Watch list for this week. Mike and I will be back next week with more updates on the Derby Watch as we get closer to the Kentucky Derby. And there are a number of big races next weekend, most notably the Fountain of Youth Stakes, featuring the scheduled return of last year's 2-year-old champion, Good Magic. Come back and see us next week. For Mike Watchmaker, I'm Jay Privman. Thanks for watching.